Bienvenidos a Sentados a la Mesa, un espacio diseñado para los padres que quieren transformar la educación y formación de sus hijos desde el hogar, retornando al diseño original. Aquí hablamos temas de actualidad sobre educación, cosmovisión, diseño, gobierno y hogar. Con ustedes, Ricardo y Ana María Bañuelos, fundadores de Transition.
Hello everyone, my name is Ana Maria, founder of Transition Ed, and today I'm here with my guest, Will Estrada, Senior Counsel at HSLDA, to discuss some major points of importance to the parents. Our job is to equip and educate the Hispanic homeschooling parents, and we have found out that we need to understand better what our parental rights are, what's going on, our history, and our fundamental rights. So Will is here today to help us understand a little bit better what is going on. Hello, Will. Thank you for joining me today.
It is great to be on with you, Ana Maria. Thank you for having me.
Well, let me tell our audience who you are, a little bit of who you are. You're a homeschool graduate, and your parents are from Puerto Rico, and you currently reside in Northern Virginia. You have 2 homeschool children. And you were the first full-time president of parentalrights.org and the Parental Rights Foundation. And then you moved back to HSLDA because those are your roots. You come from there. And now you are the contact attorney for the states of California, Georgia, Illinois, Maryland, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Tennessee, Wyoming, and Washington, D.C. So right now you're very popular too. You're dealing with a case in Illinois, and we will be sharing with our audience that as well. We are creating this interview with you, Will, because we're also planning to have a webinar on April 14th at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time to educate our community about what is going on with home education and parental rights. I think it's very important at this point that we understand that we are sometimes under attack, and we need to learn how to defend our parental rights and how to confront some of those forces that are against them. So let's start by telling our audience what HSLDA is and does.
Well, Ana Maria, HSLDA was founded in 1983. We're 42 years old, and let me set the stage for what homeschooling was like in 1983. It was actually illegal in many of the 50 states. So here in the United States of America, there were parents in the 80s and even the early 90s who were being prosecuted, harassed, and in a few instances arrested and thrown in prison for the crime of educating their children at home. That's the environment where HSLDA was founded. Today, because of the dedication and hard work of moms, dads, grandparents, state associations, and the work that we did at HSLDA, homeschooling is legal in all 50 states. It's legal in all the United States territories. It's mainstream in the United States as well, particularly post-COVID. And in addition to homeschooling growing and thriving in the United States, it is expanding overseas as well. It's kind of a different environment in the international scene as opposed to in the United States of America, and some of that is because of the laws, the fundamental rights we have in the United States, but it is growing internationally as well, and it's legal and mainstream in all 50 states.
So thank you for all the work you do throughout the year, for what you're doing right now. We really wanted our audience to understand the connection between our home education right to the parental rights. There sometimes parents are just enjoying the benefits of home education, but they don't understand the history and what the parental right, where do parental rights fall into that experience as a home educator. I think is directly connected. We cannot just enjoy the freedoms and enjoy the benefits of home education. For the past 3 or 4 years, we have seen a new generation of homeschoolers rising up to enjoy this huge blessing, but also we're seeing the lack of understanding of the history and how our rights are connected. So can you explain a little bit about that connection between parental rights and home education?
Ana Maria, it's a great question, and the way I usually explain it is to visualize an umbrella. The umbrella is parental rights, and that covers numerous different pillars that are under that umbrella. So parental rights is the umbrella, but think of other ones like medical decisions. What vaccines will I give my child? Think of child rearing. How will I discipline? Will it be timeout? Will it be loss of privileges? Will it be corporal discipline for younger children done in a loving manner? Those are things that come in under parental rights. Then, will I bring my child to church? How will I raise them? What are the decisions that I'll make? What are kind of the family rules that we'll have? And then one very critical component of parental rights is education. How will my child be educated? Will it be at public school? Will it be at private school? Will it be in a charter? Will it be sectarian private school? Or will it be in homeschooling? So all of those pillars are under the umbrella of parental rights, but they're all critically important to the formation of a young person, to how parents raise their children.
It's definitely something to cherish and to value deeply, because we have the right to choose how to educate our children, and home education falls into that category. So that's to dismiss any doubt from the parents that think that they're doing something illegal, that they are experimenting and just standing on wet sand, and they're getting into something that doesn't work. It is your right to home educate, especially here in the U.S. We're so blessed to have that right legalized all throughout the 50 states, with such a vast history in which HSLDA it's a key organization into the benefits we experiment today. But moving deeper into this topic of parental rights, we know we have them, but we also know we are sometimes under attack on those rights. And sometimes we just enjoy, again, our journey of home education and disregard what is going on the legal side of home education. And I think that's why it's so important to discuss this, because parents don't quite know, especially in our Hispanic community, that legal side or legislative side of home education. And that's why we're doing this. So how have they been attacked, our parental rights? How have they been attacked, and how they're being attacked now?
That's a great question, Ana Maria. Let me start by saying that we are a law firm that represents homeschool families, that protects homeschool families. We represent them in the courts, in the legislatures, in the media. So we are a legal and advocacy firm that defends your family's right to be able to educate your children. So when we think about the threats that we've seen to homeschooling, we kind of have to back up a little bit and look in a few minutes at kind of a couple thousand years of recorded human history. I recently wrote a law review. It was published by Liberty University School of Law. It's titled Homeschooling in the United States, A Seismic Parental Rights Victory. And what I did was I started at the very beginning. In the beginning, God created. And so I went back to look at the views of parental rights in ancient Jewish teachings, in Christian teachings, in Islamic teachings, the three great Abrahamic world religions. Then I looked at the Greek philosophers, who of course were polytheistic. They were not Christians, they were not even monotheistic, they were polytheists. Then we looked at the Greek philosophers, Roman philosophers, the English common law philosophers, think of Sir William Blackstone, John Locke, all the way up to our founders. And then we went to the United States Constitution. And Ana Maria, the really fascinating thing is that until about the 1920s, from the dawn of human civilization all the way to the early 1920s, everyone agreed parental rights were fundamental, the highest right, because they came from the Creator. They came from God. Or even the Greek philosophers would look back and say they come from kind of how we're born, and they would look at the animal kingdom. And our founders believed the same thing, that our rights came from God. Our Declaration of Independence in 1776 famously said, "We are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." So everything was going great, dawn of human civilization, until about the 1920s. And then things began to change. As we had industrialization, as we had World War I, as we had the federal government taking on more power, we began to see challenges to parental rights. And first, they came in the context of private schools. And this usually surprises people when I talk with them, because we look around maybe Catholic private schools or sectarian private schools or non-sectarian private schools. Today, they're very well established and they're very popular. Sometimes they're very expensive, but they're very popular in the United States and even internationally. But in the 1920s, that wasn't the case. Nebraska passed a law in the early 1920s that banned private schools and parents from having children taught in any language other than English. And this went up to the U.S. Supreme Court in the case of Meyer versus Nebraska. And in 1923, the U.S. Supreme Court struck that down and said, no, states can't tell private schools and parents what languages children should be instructed in. That's between the private school and the parents. 2 years after that was the very famous case of Pierce versus Society of Sisters. This case came because Oregon, led by the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK, passed a law banning all private schools. So religious private schools, secular private schools, they were banned in the state of Oregon. This went up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and in 1925, we're actually coming up on the 100-year anniversary, the centennial of the famous case of Pierce versus Society of Sisters on June 1st, 2025. So on June 1st, 1925, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously ruled in Pierce versus Society of Sisters that the child is not the mere creature of the state. That's the quote the Supreme Court said. They unanimously struck down Oregon's law and said, no, parents can choose private schools. So private schools won their day in court 100 years ago. Then more recently, in the 80s and 90s, as parents were wanting to homeschool their children, they were told, no, you can't. And they were prosecuted. That's when HSLDA was founded. And we had to defend in court and in the legislatures the fundamental God-given right of parents like you, Ana Maria, and others to be able to choose to homeschool their children. And today, the last court case, the last family who was arrested, that was in 1994 in Texas. It was called the Leeper decision. And today, in all 50 states, homeschooling is legal. And there are still challenges to parental rights. We're still fighting and defending. You mentioned HB 2827 in Illinois, which is an active and ongoing legislative battle that would roll back homeschool freedom. But we're still fighting these threats. But the battle is continuing, but we've won some major battles when we look back on history.
Thank you for such a great explanation. Will, I think sometimes we just take for granted what we have, and we have so many blessings as home educators. I want parents to know that this is absolutely legal. It's a fundamental right to home educate, and we are thankful for your time, Will, explaining this. Unfortunately, we always have enemies of those rights, enemies of those fundamental rights. And recently, we're seeing the case in Illinois, but also going into more details. There's been a model bill being proposed that is called the Make Homeschool Safe Act. And I would like to mention that to our audience in this interview, because we're going to discuss it in our webinar, but it's important for them to start to get their feet wet in this kind of situation. We're all diving into the months to come. And you can also find a lot of information about this model bill at the HSLDA website as well. It's very well detailed. But what can you tell us now, very briefly, what are those key elements we need to be aware of in this bill? What can parents do to be prepared, and what are we dealing with in the months to come?
So I want to preface this by saying homeschooling is legal. We at HSLDA will vigorously defend any homeschool family who's a member of HSLDA and whose homeschool right, whose fundamental right is challenged. So that's the first thing. But as we discussed, as you said, Ana Maria, there is an organization out there that last year advanced a model bill called the Make Homeschool Safe Act, which would roll back in any state where it was introduced our hard-won freedoms. So first, what is this organization? It's called the Coalition for Responsible Home Education. It sounds like a nice-sounding organization, but really they are pro-government regulation, pro-authoritarian, dedicated to rolling back homeschool freedom. Last year, the Coalition for Responsible Home Education advanced a model bill. What is a model bill? Well, it has not been introduced in its kind of full form in any state. It's more of a white paper, an idea that Coalition for Responsible Home Education is trying to get legislators to advance. And let me tell you one thing about what this 24-page bill, the Make Homeschool Safe Act, if it were adopted in any state, would do. It has a provision that says if you are even accused of child abuse or neglect, if you even come into contact with Child Protective Services, then you lose the right to be able to homeschool for 3 years. And let me explain how egregious this is. Let me say you're having a fight with a neighbor and they call Child Protective Services and say, oh, the Estrada family, their children don't have any food. And the caseworker shows up to make sure your children are safe, and it's Thanksgiving. And you've got the feast on your table, you've got the turkey and everything. Your children are very well fed. In fact, they can't eat any more food. And the social worker says, oh, this is ridiculous. I'm closing this investigation. You're good to go. Under the Make Homeschool Safe Act, simply because you were accused of this and a caseworker came to your house, you would not be able to homeschool for up to 3 years. This violates not only our fundamental rights of being able to educate our children at home, but just concepts of due process, that you're innocent until found guilty, that you have your day in court, that you have the right for attorneys like myself to defend you, that it takes a judgment of a court and a jury before you're convicted, before you lose freedom. We kind of take this for granted. Innocent until proven guilty in the United States of America. And it would take away your precious right to be able to educate your children at home simply from an accusation. Now, the good news is the Make Homeschool Safe Act has not yet been introduced in any state, but already we saw some of its provisions introduced in Virginia. We had a very fierce fight in the legislature. Thankfully, we won that fight. It was the battle over SB 1031, but we have an ongoing fight actually in Illinois to defend homeschool freedom. Coalition for Responsible Home Education is testifying, is lobbying for their bill, and so we have our work cut out for us, and that's why I encourage our listeners to sign up for that Monday, April 14th webinar where we go diving deep into Coalition for Responsible Home Education and the Make Homeschool Safe Act, because this could be coming to a legislature in your state.
Absolutely. We're moving ahead and we would like our parents to learn more. Just go to HSLDA's website or just contact Will directly via email. I know you are very connected to the community. I love that about HSLDA. You're very engaged with the parents, and we need the parents. That's the strongest voice at this moment. Specifically, I will say in the Hispanic community, which is growing at a fast pace. Our parents in the Hispanic community need to understand this connection, need to value their rights, and realize this is a fundamental right, and we can stand for it, we can fight it, and we can win it. It's not recent that we see these threats or attacks. I think it's been forever, since Genesis, since the beginning of times. We always see an attack on parental rights because really it's a spiritual battlefield that we're dealing with. Many times it's a clash of worldviews, unfortunately, at some point. And we want our parents to also understand that background and how to defend their rights when the time comes. So thank you, Will, for this time in this interview and also for joining us for that webinar. Parents, you can now register. It's a free webinar. It will be in English, so all our bilingual parents are welcome. And we hope you can gain a lot of education and insight from this webinar, in which we will be discussing how to prepare, but also how all this system works in order to protect, defend, and continue enjoying our right to home educate our children. Last words, Will, what would you like to say to those parents that recently started home educating their children at home? Final words regarding that strong and decisive choice that we make. I say it impacts generations, because when we decide to home educate, we're impacting not only our children, but our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren.
I love homeschooling. Homeschooling works well. It worked for my family. I'm the oldest of 8 children. All of us were homeschooled, and it was an incredible educational option for my siblings and for myself. My wife is a homeschool graduate as well, and so it was natural fit for us to homeschool our kids. They're 12 and 8. They're thriving. And so I want you to know I love the Hispanic community. I'm a proud Puerto Rican. I love being here and seeing the work that Ana Maria and her team is doing, and you can homeschool. There are so many options and opportunities and supports for you and your family that are out there. So get engaged, follow the work of Transition Ed and Ana Maria, and we are here to support and equip and help you as well.
Okay, Will, can you please clarify a little bit what you mean by fundamental rights? Many communities understand that, but the Hispanics that move here into the US, we don't get much education about how the law works, how the Constitution works. And I think it's foundational as well for our community to understand what those rights mean. Fundamental rights, what is that?
That's a great question, Ana Maria, and it's really unique in the United States legal system. And this goes all the way back to our founding document, the United States Constitution. The U.S. Constitution, which was adopted in 1787, so a couple hundred years ago, we're actually coming up on the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, which was 1776. But it was very different in that it didn't give rights to the people. It established the framework of what the government could do, and then the government could not go beyond that. But our founders did something very unique. They said, we know that humans are sinful, and they have a tendency to accumulate power to themselves. One leader said that it really can be described as absolute power corrupts, and the more power you have, the more corruption there will be. And so our founders said, we're going to have the Bill of Rights. These were amendments that were added to the United States Constitution that said some things are so important, so fundamental to our relationship with others, our relationship with our Creator, our relationship with God, that we're going to enshrine them in the text of the Constitution. And so that is where the phrase fundamental rights come from. There's been other sort of wording like history and traditions of what's founded in our country, but kind of a description of some of our fundamental rights are the highest rights. Free speech, for example, is a fundamental right. The ability to have a firearm, for example, to protect yourself and your family, that's a fundamental right. Parental rights, your right, as we talked about, that umbrella that covers so many other things, is a fundamental right. The right of citizens to be able to vote, the right to be secure in your persons, houses, papers, and effect from government interference unless they have a court-issued warrant, a court order, for example. That's another fundamental right. And all of these have their basis in the Constitution and in our Bill of Rights, so amendments to the U.S. Constitution. So these are the highest protections. The only way a government, either a state, local, state, or federal, can override a fundamental right is if they show that it's of the highest order, not otherwise served. The legal term is strict scrutiny, where anything the government does that limits your fundamental right, these God-given rights is another way of saying it, then the courts are going to look at very, very carefully, and usually they're going to strike down the government action. And so it's important for us as homeschoolers, whether or not you're a lawyer, to kind of understand this concept of fundamental rights, the highest level of freedom. Think of also God-given rights. It's what our founders talked about in the Declaration of Independence when they said we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
That's a fantastic explanation so that our parents can understand how unique our fundamental rights are. And so where does educating our children stand in between those rights, if we can call it a fundamental right, to educate our children?
So right here in that law review, there have been about 14 court cases, starting with 1923, Meyer versus Nebraska. That was the case we talked about of what languages could you teach your children, have them taught in private school. And the most recent case was in 2000. It was a case called Troxel versus Granville. And in that case, the U.S. Supreme Court said the right of parents to direct the education and upbringing of their children is now established beyond debate as an enduring American tradition. That was just as recent as 2000. There has actually not been a major U.S. Supreme Court case about parental rights since Troxel versus Granville in 2000, but there's a case that's currently getting ready to be scheduled for oral arguments in the U.S. Supreme Court. It's called Mahmoud case. It comes out of Montgomery County, Maryland, and this is dealing with the rights of parents of children who are enrolled in public schools to be taught things that violate their religious beliefs. So that's going to be a very interesting case. We don't know yet if it's just going to focus on religious liberty, which is a fundamental right, or whether it will also have discussion of parental rights, which is another fundamental right. So for legal nerds like myself who love the law and who love court cases, we're watching the Mahmoud case very, very close.
Thank you for clarifying that, and thank you for your time, Will, today. I hope everybody has gained a lot of knowledge just with this brief interview with you, and we invite everybody to sign up for that webinar, April 14th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will put subtitles to this interview so people can join us, but the webinar will be in English, and we hope everybody that is bilingual can join us, because there's very important key things that we need to be aware of in the years to come. So this will be very educational. Thank you, Will, again for joining us for the webinar and joining us in Miami for the second time. We're very excited to see you, and thank you for what you do. We bless you. We pray for HSLDA. We're very thankful for everything you have done in the past as well. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Ana Maria. Pleasure to be on, and I'm looking forward to April 14th.